I'm live. I don't see me on the stream. All right. So this is Commander X live on Unity for Julian online vigil 5.0 monthly vigil. And this is my first time hosting, and I'm just messing it all up, right? So, but I'm going to come back and do it again. I have a feeling. So get used to me. I have my own radio show called X Speaks the World Through Sunglasses. It airs every Saturday on Anonymous Global Internet Radio. And so I'm hoping I can do a pretty good interview with Mr. Ross Cameron, who I'm very, very anxious to meet. And if you see me staring at my little phone, it's because I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Okay, he says he's here. That's great. I pass host to him. Bear with us, folks. This is one of those little technical details. There's stuff going on here, I think. Somebody let me know if there's something I'm supposed to do. But otherwise, I'm going to keep talking. So that was a fantastic interview with Elizabeth. How about them apples, huh? As some would say. But she came on my show back when this whole thing broke. It was a Saturday, I believe, and she was a guest. She was already scheduled to be a guest on my show prior to the story breaking that Glenn Greenwald was announcing that Julian was pretty much definitely going to get hauled out of the embassy. And so our show, my show with Elizabeth on it, was all about that. And then immediately they began, I believe that was Vigil 3.0. Might have been 2.0. I'm not sure. I think 2.0. So it was a bunch of vigils back. And then, so they did that vigil, and then Susie invited me on a couple vigils later. I came on, and Susie Dawson interviewed me, and it was just fantastic. It's so cool. I mean, she can just elicit the best in me. And I got to admit, here's Ross. I see him. I see somebody. I see Joe Lauria.
Yeah, this is Joe Lauria here. How are you?
Hi.
I just want to fill some of this dead air time until Ross comes in. Could you tell us a little bit about the time? Did you know Julian in Germany? Is that when you knew him?
No. I first ran across Julian Assange in a sort of interpersonal way in the 80s, the late 80s. I believe it was 1989. And it was an online bulletin board that eventually became the Chaos Computer Club. And we ran into each other, and I only knew him or knew of him as Mendax. And to most of us back then, he was just too legendary to even, I mean, just I spoke with him, sure, but to say that I knew him, I think would be a stretch. I think everybody wished back then they knew Mendax.
When did you find out who his real name? When did you find out his?
When in 2010, when the whole WikiLeaks thing broke, I had not kept track of him all these years. I had gone on to do other things. I had worked in the anti-apartheid movement. I had worked in the movement to stop open CIA recruitment on college campuses. So I had done a bunch of different things. I worked to try to save Napster. That was my first sort of online campaign. And in those intervening years, Julian was busy, in 1999, he registered leaks.org. So he was already fully cognizant of the power of transparency, and the idea of building a transparency platform was already well along in his mind by 1999. And during that period, we didn't have a lot to do with each other. And then 10 years later, in 2010, when the Collateral Murder video was released, it came back on my radar. And that's when I read an article and it mentioned that he was Mendax. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe, that, all these years later, here's Julian Assange. So, one thing led to another. I ended up doing my own thing with the sort of founding of Anonymous, and ended up getting my own sort of fame. And then I reached out to him once I had a little bit of limelight myself and a little bit of power to do so. I reached out to him as X, and we reconnected, and that was several years ago. We've been working together ever since.
That's what I was going to ask you. So you, after 2010, you got in touch with him, and he remembered you, of course, from the bulletin boards.
I doubt it. I've never asked him, and I'm not sure I want to know the answer. But I mean, like I said, because he was a hero. I mean, back then he was the superhero, the online superhero, even then. So And I mean, now I'm, got a little bit of shine on me for having done some things in the world that people are either happy or upset about. But back then, I was certainly not anybody to, be cognizant of or anything like that. So when I reached back out to him, it was actually because I dedicated my first book to him, and I had a copy of it hand delivered by a movie producer to the embassy. So,
well, we got.
Sorry, yeah, okay, Ross Cameron is here. Sorry to butt in. Ross Cameron's here, fine. But X, you have host, so you need to pass host to somebody.
Okay.
So try clicking on my name in Zoom, and on the right-hand side there should be options, drop-down options, and make me host.
Okay. Patient. I'm on my Android, so share participants. Okay, got it. There you go, Susie.
Well done, thank you.
Okay, sorry it took so long, guys. Everybody.
No problem, and here's your guest.
Doing my best. And here's my guest. All right, everybody. Thank you all for your patience anyway, as we work through this.
Here he is, Mr. Ross Cameron.
G'day.
Hey, how are you, Mr. Cameron? It's a pleasure to meet you, sir.
I'm absolutely outstanding, Commander. I was reluctant to interview the beautiful discussion you were having. It's only going to deteriorate from here.
Well, please don't worry about that at all, and please just call me X. The commander is way too pretentious, man. We're all in this together.
Well,
but it's an honor to meet you.
Well, Marcus Aurelius in the Meditations, very first chapter, talks about the things that he admires about his adoptive father, who was Caesar of Rome before him. And he says he was meticulous always to treat people with the respect they deserved. So I'm very happy to describe you as my commander in this situation.
Okay, well, I want to just start off and tell everybody, because we have no idea who is watching or listening. Ross Cameron is an Australian politician. He was a Liberal member of the Australian, and you correct me, Ross, if I get any of this wrong, since I was supposed to. Well, he was a Liberal member of the Australian House of Representatives from March 1996 to October 2004, and he is currently a journalist with Sky News, where he hosts the show Outsiders. He's often spoke out vociferously against the industrial surveillance complex and has been at the forefront of the movement to free Julian Assange.
Okay, well, I'm getting silence, a pause in the transmission. I think we
it looks like his internet has just dropped out. So give us your best monologue about Julian and WikiLeaks. Ross, take it away.
Okay, well, look, I'm up for the challenge. It's an absolutely, it's a beautiful morning in Sydney. We've just commenced daylight saving, so everyone has wound the clocks back by an hour. So I actually had an extra hour to get my thoughts ready for the vigil for Julian. Look, I'm here as a volunteer, 100% volunteer. I'm going to be doing a TV show for Sky News on the Foxtel network in Australia in 1 hour and 50 minutes, for which I am paid. But I'm here as a humble servant in the vineyard of freedom.
As am I. Listen, I found your Wikipedia page most interesting, and I have some questions I'd like to ask you. I'd like to actually interview you, if that's all right.
Okay, sure.
Great. I understand that, I want to start the discussion with a look at the official Australian government response to one of their own citizens being locked in a broom closet with no internet, no visitors, for the crime of national security publishing. I think we all agree that that response from the Australian government, from our perspective at least, has been somewhat lacking. As an outsider, being uninformed about internal Australian politics, educate me on why this government response has been so lackluster. Is this how the majority of Australians feel, or is this the negative attitude emanating from the Australian version of, say, the deep state?
Well, it's a good question, Commander.
Thank you.
In truth, we should extend the ambit of your question to include the National Press Gallery, whose response has been more silent than the crickets for the last 5 years, I would say. And what we saw, we have seen various flickers of life in what now looks like the corpse of the Australian conscience. From the immediately departed Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, who's just been deposed and sent back to and headed off into almost exile in New York. But as a backbencher, Malcolm Turnbull was in fact the most articulate, lucid and persuasive voice for Julian Assange, and gave what has now become famous or infamous in a speech to the Sydney University Faculty of Law, in which Malcolm Turnbull, then federal member for Wentworth, laid out the case for Julian Assange from a legal standpoint while he was speaking to the Faculty of Law at Sydney University. And that speech is an absolute tour de force. And whenever the United States assembles its excuse for justice and the American dream to try Julian for some offence, which we hear they have assembled a massive grand jury. Of course, we haven't had the benefit of seeing what the actual accusation may be, what the charge may be, or what vandalism to the Constitution of the United States will have to be engaged in order to even make a charge. But nonetheless, Malcolm Turnbull laid out the case in a very compelling way in 2011. And he was actually introduced at that event as a little bit of irony by the then Dean of the Faculty of Law at Sydney University, whose name is Professor Gillian Triggs, who went on to become President of the Human Rights Commission of Australia. And she was showering praise on Malcolm Turnbull, then member for Wentworth, as he laid out the legal case for the complete innocence of Julian Assange. Then the two of them together held hands. Turnbull went into the lodge as Prime Minister of Australia. Professor Gillian Triggs went into the presidency of the Human Rights Commission, and both of them sat completely silent on the case of Julian Assange for their entire time in office. And they became the most submissive little lambs to what we might call, whether we call it the deep state, the Five Eyes, the sort of green left industrial machine, the capital E establishment, the forces of oppression who are so clearly terrorised at the prospect of a free human being expressing his or her own opinion. So they went completely silent. But the point is that, just stop me at any time, X, if you're getting bored, right? Because
I'm not at all. I really want to get to the dysfunctionality within the Australian government that's causing this. My key thing is this the will of the people, or is this the will of a small group of either politically oriented party people or deep state or what? Because I can't believe in my heart of hearts, I like to believe that people, the best of people, and I can't believe that the Australian people actually feel this. It just seems that's somehow being thwarted, but I guess that's that's for you to tell us?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I am I'm a fully signed up devotee, groupie, sort of hanger on of the cause of both WikiLeaks and Julian. My co-host on my TV show, which is called Outsiders, is, I would say, less so. And he sort of sees me as being, my advocacy of Julian as being an expression of my eccentricity. And we kind of argue about where the mainstream is on this question. But one of the problems, I think, is the embarrassment of what I call the mainstream media or the National Press Gallery about their own completely limp and tepid performance. Because I think it was 2012, the Sydney Morning Herald or the Fairfax media in Australia combined in the sort of three-way publication of one of the early dumps. I think it may have been the Chelsea Manning related material when we had a German newspaper. It might have been Der Spiegel. We had, I think it was either the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. You may recall better than me. And then we had the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age in Australia, who were all jointly publishing large tracts of the WikiLeaks material. And indeed, the National Press Gallery gave Julian its highest award in that year, which is called the Walkley Award. And there was a sense in which with our media is intensely left-wing in its prejudices. And so long as Julian was publishing material which appeared to damage the Bush administration, the Australian media was right behind him, giving him the highest accolades available and jointly publishing his content. But as soon as Julian and WikiLeaks, applying exactly the same principle of transparency, began publishing the DNC emails, suddenly Australia's national media just dumped him like a sack of manure.
As have most of the Western media, which I think my opinion of Western mainstream media in general is very, very well known. Ross, I like to always come back to as an activist and not just a radio host. I like to come back to what people can do to be effective. So we've got maybe hundreds or thousands, possibly thousands of people watching us right now. What can, first of all, Australians who are listening to you at this moment, but also foreigners like myself here in Mexico, what can people do to have an impact on the current lackluster response that the Australian government is giving to Julian Assange's crisis? What can people do to affect that and help make it shift in our direction?
Yeah,
what concrete actions could they take?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is just as we go about our day, as we enjoy our private lives, I think it's important that we ought to make it clear to our friends, to our workmates, to our neighbours, that we do have this kind of eccentric, if necessary, commitment to the welfare of one human being, whatever one's political convictions. The kind of torture which has taken place here is an embarrassment to the entire Western world. And we ought to, just as we go about our daily events, be prepared to articulate it. We then go a step further and say, in the Australian Parliament, there are 150 members of the House of Representatives, 76 members of the Senate. I would say we've got 2 voices out of the whole lot. We did have a Greens senator who I think subsequently lost his seat. We have an Andrew Wilkie, a former whistleblower himself, who has been disappointingly, somewhere between silent and grossly ineffective. Then we have somebody from the right in Pauline Hanson, who I think has been the best defender of Julian. But what I say to the citizen is everyone has a member of parliament, and it's very important that we don't allow that what I think of as the deep state, the intelligence establishment, who have worked so hard to blacken Julian Assange's reputation as a human being on the basis of a series of grotesque but completely false charges. I think we have to push back pretty hard against that sort of reputational damage, just by making clear in public fora that we stand with Julian. And I think we've got to actually raise it directly and personally with our members of parliament, state and federal.
So let me just sum up sort of what you're saying. What would be a concrete action that they could take would be to first start engaging on a grassroots basis, start engaging just pretty much everybody around you, everybody. No reason you just can't talk to people. And you can augment that idea. You can carry around things like handy cards or pamphlets or I know one lady made up a handy little bookmark when she went to stores. So there's all sorts of ways to socially engage those around you on this issue of getting the Australian government to be more responsive to this crisis. And the second thing I hear you saying is that Australians need to engage more their own representatives and their own politicians on this issue. They need to be writing to their politicians and engaging the members of parliament on this issue and letting them know that they don't buy into the garbage, they don't buy into the blackening of his reputation, and that they want him protected as an Australian citizen. So now, foreigners, is there any petitions or anything that you know of going on out there to sort of pressure Australia from the outside? And if not, would you encourage people to say, do things like maybe go protest in an Australian embassy or something like that?
Yeah, well, I would say, there's a few things. I don't claim to have any special wisdom on the subject, but I'm happy to give you my 2 cents worth. Number one, I believe there is a kind of civil war taking place in the United States, which we have, in part witnessed it in the bitterness of the Kavanaugh nomination, which has been confirmed, as I understand it, just since we began the interview. But more broadly, whatever you think of Donald Trump, and I like him, because he is prepared to confront the established centres of inertia of the state in its lack of response to ordinary citizens. And I think there is a chance that if Trump can be, re-elected, that he may feel he has the security, if you like, to really start standing behind Julian Assange instead of trying to intimidate him from in front. I am still optimistic. I have not written off Trump, not least because he understands better than anybody else the role that the revelation of the DNC emails had in his election as president. And I think there is a strong argument to say that had that conduct been kept secret, there is a decent chance that Trump would not be president today.
So basically, what especially people in the United States, you're saying could do to be effective, even indirectly to the Australian government, would be to pressure the American government. Because really, isn't it true? I mean, sorry, but I got to say it. I mean, most of us really think that Australia is just the 51st state of the United States. I mean, yeah. And you guys have ceded so much of your sovereignty to the United States. I'm not sure that you're indistinguishable from the empire at this point. So you're saying basically make sure that, and I agree with you, by the way, your assessment of Trump, 100%. 100% across the line. So you're saying that that could be effective as well in drawing Australia into the proper response, what their response should be based on humanitarian law, international human rights, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, what we're seeing, in my view, is a kind of, I don't believe the response to Assange of the United States today represents an authentic expression of the view of the President of the United States. I think it represents the view of the Department of Justice, the FBI, the CIA, the Central Intelligence, the intelligence. I wouldn't even necessarily say the rank and file members of the FBI share this view, but certainly the kind of James Comey, Clapper, Andy McCabe, Strzok brigade, who I believe got corrupted at some point over the sort of Obama-Clinton era, perhaps even previously to the Bush era. They got corrupted and they lost, their moorings came unstuck, and they stopped serving the citizen and started becoming purely agents of the state. But I think there is quite, I think we need to make it clear that all of us are Julian Assange. I mean, every journalist is Julian Assange.
Well, that's interesting. That leads me into my next question, because as a journalist and a publisher yourself, I'd like you to sort of close, because we've got a few minutes, as I understand it, left. I'd like you to talk, Ross, about the implications globally for media and journalists if Julian Assange is in prison. And I'd also like you to save a minute or two, if you can, for the reverse of that, and the implications globally to if Julian Assange is free.
Yeah, well, love to. I mean, the first point is,
worst case scenario, Julian Assange is locked up for the rest of his life. What does that mean, even to the freedom to publish in the world globally?
Yeah, well, you see, I have satisfied myself, as indeed did Malcolm Turnbull, that Julian Assange has broken no law. He has broken no Australian law, and he's broken no American law, according to Malcolm Turnbull, immediately, past Prime Minister of Australia. He's broken no laws. So then, what is the basis upon which he's being persecuted? And you have to say, and when I say he's broken no laws, I mean the key cases which are spelt out very clearly, indeed, in Malcolm Turnbull's speech. One of which is the Commonwealth versus Fairfax, but likewise in the United States, the law is quite settled, and it was settled in relation to the Pentagon Papers, where I'm pretty sure it was the Washington Post. New York Post, I think it was. Don't quote me. But it was one of the big three. Had got the Pentagon Papers, a vast tranche of documents revealing a whole range, a broad range, perfectly analogous to, the Afghanistan and Iraq material that Julian published. And the US courts considered the disclosure and transparency issues very carefully. And they came out and they said there is no basis upon which we can suppress the publication of this material once it has been leaked. The leaking of the material may or may not involve an offence, but once it has been leaked and is in the hands of a publisher, the Second Amendment provides a very, very powerful protection for every American journalist. Now, what I understand is about to take place is that in order to make some kind of bogus, petty, vindictive attack on Julian stick, they're basically going to have to bury the Second Amendment as far as all foreign journalists are concerned. And secondly, it appears they're going to assert a right to extradite a journalist with whom the United States intelligence community disagrees. They're going to assert a right to extradite that person to face some sort of a kangaroo court. Now, I say this is a chilling development for every journalist globally, and the only question any journalist in the world should be asking is, who is next, Uncle Sam? as far as Julian's release, I believe that we are at a moment in history, and people like Commander X, Susie Dawson, Julian Assange, Elizabeth Leah Voss, and others are at the fault line of history. And we have a number of elements coming together for the first time. One of which is the transfer of so much of our lives into the digital space, where a dash and a dot are the defining elements of our communication, of our commerce, of our entertainment, of our being. And so the state has enjoyed a capacity to take control of our lives in a way which simply was not technologically possible before this moment.
But you have us hackers. You have us hackers, man, and we're your best. We're literally your best friend in all of this. Someday, I even said, in Australia was actually, I said this months before Australia tried to do this, but I said months before on Twitter, I said someday they're going to try to make it illegal for us to even teach you how to protect yourself. And sure enough, Australia tried to pass a law that was going to do just that. I mean, people, I think, will really, especially in 20 years when they start writing the history of this conflict, this huge cultural conflict. And when we're victorious, when they write the history, they're going to talk about the hackers a whole different way than they talk about us now. Let me tell you something.
You're going to get a whole chapter, and you will deserve it. You will deserve it. But what I do say is I am believing, hoping, praying, and secretly deep down in my heart, frankly expecting that the state is going to have to do a deal. The state is we will continue to march around the walls of Jericho, but there is a moment at which the edifice crumbles. And the reason I say that is because I believe we have nature on our side. The idea, the capacity to think and to articulate complex thought through words and language, spoken and written, is a uniquely human capability. And human beings will naturally find means to express it. So the deep state is currently engaged in an attempt to assert its power with sufficient breadth and vigour to suppress the nature of a human being. And I just don't believe, no matter how much money they spend, no matter how many new means of replicating a hacker, of defaming a man's character, of inspiring allies to make dodgy charges, criminal offences against individuals the state doesn't like. And it's intriguing, ironic, the person they don't like the most is the publisher and journalist worldwide who tells the truth most frequently.
And interestingly enough, the central dumping point for most of us hackers for the crap that we've been stealing for the last 10 years, i.e. my good friend Jeremy Hammond, who we owe an entire section of WikiLeaks to, the Stratford the global intelligence files, which were the Stratford files that he took. And these weren't just any hackers. These were anons who provided a significant percentage of the leaked material on WikiLeaks. And many of them, many of us, I should say, are paying a pretty horrific price either for supporting, assisting, or giving material to WikiLeaks. It's not just about the whistleblowers. In fact, I think somebody said there's more material that's hacked now on there than there are whistleblown, I guess, material or whatever. So, and we're paying our own price out here in the world. Trust me, for trying to liberate that information. I think Barrett Brown said it best. Some of this information is never going to see the light of day from some sort of judicial oversight or congressional hearings or even from journalistic investigation. This material is never going to see the light of day from even a whistleblower. It's only going to see the light of day unless one of us goes in and takes it from them. We take their secrets from them. Waiting for somebody to get a conscience. Fuck waiting for somebody to get a conscience and ruin their life for the honor of spilling the beans. we'll just go in there and we'll get that crap and we'll give it to WikiLeaks. And I think that's going to be a trend going forward that you're going to see a lot more of.
Well, I tell you, if as a taxpayer-funded state agency, you rush around, as the CIA did, to the allies of the United States, urging them to find some basis upon which to charge Julian Assange with a criminal offence, I agree with you. I think if that is going to be the basis upon which the state plays this game.
Hey Ross, can I hold you up for just 1 second? I've got some technical things going on here. I'm on a device that doesn't have a keyboard, folks. So I get that the next person is here. So, but I need to be instructed on what to do. So Ross, I'm thinking that I should maybe start wrapping up with you because I just got a ping from the next panelist. It was great talking to you. First of all, I want to say it was fantastic to finally, I've been listening to your interviews, and like I said at the beginning, uploading them to the podcast forever. But it's great to get to speak to you, and I really, really hope we get to speak again. I think maybe next time the way they do it, it seems you're going to probably be interviewing me.
Well, I want to do that. I want to get the whole anonymous story. I want to get. You can be like my shop steward for the hackers. You can
start with my first 2 books, and my third is out on November 5th. My third book drops on Guy Fawkes Day. That's my only plug for myself today, and so check them out. I think that I guess we're going to close, but again, I need you tech guys need to genie me out of power here or something, so that I can because I don't know how to do anything. But anyway, thank you for coming on. I guess we can kill some time. I had a couple other questions. This week we heard the seemingly good news that Julian's Ecuador citizenship has not been revoked, and the foreign minister of Ecuador confirmed that indeed his political asylum remains firmly in place. So as we close the segment, Ross, talk about that and your thoughts on where we stand. Where do we stand in defending Julian? Are we winning? Are we losing? Is this a victory? Talk about it.
Well, I would say it's a close-run thing. I'm very pleased to see the Ecuadorian Parliament has stood firm. As an Australian, I have to tell you, I find it profoundly embarrassing. I find it extraordinary that an Australian citizen looks to the elected government of Ecuador to defend his interests and his rights, while Australia's Prime Minister, who is happy to pray for rain, which I'm not opposed to, but not to pray for the release and safe return to Australia of one of his own citizens. So look, I just say, I believe this is, as I say, an historic cause. I believe a person can be understood in significant ways by whether or not they stand with Julian Assange at this moment in history. I think there's lots of people who are easy to stand up for, lots of causes that are, that a celebrity in Hollywood who will have an agent will say, you should associate yourself with, people for the ethical treatment of animals. But I say, why can't we have people for the ethical treatment of Julian Assange? I think we will prevail. I feel acutely just the physical impact on one man. I mean, I'm a guy who virtually worships the sun and who loves sunlight. Prince Andrew is alleged to have said that a day without golf is a day wasted. I think a day without sunlight is a day wasted. But for Julian, he has no choice in the matter. And so I just want to see him reunited with the sun, with his mother, Kristinn, who I regard as an absolutely extraordinary Australian who's providing real sort of intellectual.
She's a queen. Kristinn is the best, man. She's a queen.
And truth is, she's the one who really first inspired me to get behind. Well, she's one of the reasons why I love him. I mean, I don't know Julian in the way that you do. I've never met the guy, but I have some sense of his mother, whom I just revere as one of the finest Australians to ever walk or breathe.
Yeah, she's a fine lady, a fine lady. Once again, I'm going to put a call out to the tech people at Unity for J, folks. I need Odo handing off here. I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to do. I got a message into Susie. We're just going to keep going though until somebody helps me. So I really don't know what to do. So, well, you know, I mean, so much has been made about me knowing Julian, but it really doesn't change a thing other than the fact that it's like if you knew somebody and they were, you know, in a crisis, it certainly makes it more, we have to wait for Susie. Okay, so we just keep going then, I guess, right, guys? Do I stay on the air? Do I play music, or do I just keep talking to Ross? So you tell me the answer on the screen here, and I'll do it. Loving it, X. Okay, we stay and we keep talking. Ross, are you up for this?
I'm up for it. I'm sending a note to
all right.
Susie.
I'm seeing all kinds of instructions. They're with me here, so or at least they seem to be telling me what to do. All right, folks. So once again, I want to first of all thank everybody that's tuned in right now on YouTube, on Anonymous Global Internet Radio, anybody else who's streaming out there on Periscope. I know we're on that too. A shout out just to everybody who's in the chats and who's viewing this. I'm watching the Twitter here, and I'm just seeing all of you yelling at me, but I'm trying to do such a great job here with Ross, so I don't really multitask like Susie does with the tweeting and the broadcasting thing, but I appreciate all the support. It appears that me and Ross have done a wonderful job, and I appreciate my wonderful guest here today helping me carry my weight here during the vigil. I was excited about having a politician journalist on. My questions were kind of, if you may have noticed, like sort of geared towards what it seemed to me. I only had 20 minutes to research you. So to find out who you even were or what you were about. I heard you talk and I loved hearing you speak, but I didn't really know much about you. So it was interesting to get a political take, especially. I think that I'm very concerned with the lackluster approach of the Australian government to all of this. And I don't know why Julian isn't being provided with more of the technical support that he needs from the Australian government. And I know that they've said that they're going to begin doing that. They actually made an announcement that they would begin giving him support, but we don't see that actually on the ground happening. And I was very delighted to have you give us advice on how both Australians can affect that problem as well as foreigners. And it was interesting because I expected maybe like petitions or something like that for the foreigners, but you feel the way to go would be to encourage the current conservative regime in America, headed up by Trump. And I have to agree. I have to agree that we are not going to get any slack from a Democratic regime at this point, supporting any kind of Democrat other than possibly Bernie, who I would trust if he came out and said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take care of this problem. I would probably trust his word. I'm not, as an anarchist, not a fan of any politician, really, to be honest with you. I don't trust any of them. But I don't think we're going to get any help from the Democratic quarter, and I don't think Bernie's ever going to be elected president. So I think we're stuck with what works. And I hate the Cheeto as much as anybody. I'm sorry, and I know you like him. I mean, so I'm letting you know I don't. I think he's a ridiculous fool, but I think he's a useful fool in as much as he has pitted himself against the elements of government that are my true enemy. For instance, the FBI are the ones who want to lock me up. James Comey spent 8 years trying to lock me up. Okay, so he's no friend of mine, and he's no friend of Donald Trump's. And that makes Donald Trump, you know what they say, you know, your enemy's enemy is your friend. So I feel that I support Trump too, and I really hope, I don't know that I'm willing to actively support his re-election. I'm not sure I can go that far, but I certainly do hope that he sticks around a while, because I think it represents the best hope of attacking what I see as the real problem, which is, I just think of it as permanent bureaucratic government. The deep state to me is just the part of government that you never change when you change an election, and that's 95% of the government. That's 99% of the government that you don't change when you have an election. To me, that's the whole trick of democracy. That's why I don't believe in it, because That's how they trick you. They every 4 years they're going to hold this big ritual called an election, and you're all going to scramble around thinking that you have some sort of say in this. But the fact of the matter is you really don't, because these unelected bureaucrats still hold their hands on every single lever and mechanism of government. And this is what we're seeing, the visceral, we're seeing now with this horrible power handover between Obama and Trump. It was a horrible handover. It was absolutely obtuse. It was non-transparent, and there was animosity between the two men as they exchanged power. And we've never really seen that before, never to this degree in America. And so what we're seeing now is a deep state that was basically 8 years entrenched into Obama's pocket, and we're left with that. We're left with that legacy of them determined to destroy this man because they don't like him. I don't like him either, but he won. I mean, I guess that's, if you're gonna, I'm not a fan of democracy, so I would tell you that's the flaw in the process, because the fact that this absolutely moronic, misogynist buffoon could, ride into power on popular election, it just proves my point. It proves my point that it really doesn't matter who you could put Donald Duck in the big chair, and absolutely nothing's going to change until we attack what I prefer to call it the deep state. It's a good enough term for me, empire, whatever you want to call it. But they're tricking you, man. This thing called democracy, it's a trick, okay? It's a trick to get you to continue to accept the real power, which is the throne, which is, as they call it in England, the crown, which is nothing but a corporation. In America, it's the Federal Reserve. But it's always a corporation. It's always a company that's behind all this. It's always about money. And who you vote for doesn't make a hill of beans until we destroy the surveillance complex, the industrial surveillance complex, until we utterly destroy it and just make them stop doing that. We're going to be left with the same problem we have now, with Julian and with Trump supporters. I'm supposed to do an interview for next guest after my interview, but I won't be able to do so. Okay, that's cool. We got it. If you want to get rid of us, just let us know. And if Ross has to go, I'll just carry on, guys. I mean, I'm a soldier, so until somebody replaces me, this is my spot on the wall. All right. So yeah, I don't know. I guess we're on our own. I'm in uncharted territory. I only had 4 questions for a half-hour interview. So, anything you want to know about me? Uh-oh. I don't hear anybody. I don't hear Ross, guys. I lost him.
Oh, sorry. How's that? Have you got me now?
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay, good. I was just trying to mute some of my background noise. I'm sitting in a slightly noisy studio. But look, I am highly sympathetic to your analysis. I mean, you are, I suppose, one step further than me in terms of the logic and ethic of the hacker. I'm open to argument. And secondly, in relation to democracy being effectively window dressing for the firm, the company, the deep state, the empire, I'm very close to your position, very close. I haven't quite given up on the dream of democracy, on the Athenian idea of consent, government by consent of the governed. But I just have been increasingly disillusioned, and the experience of Julian Assange would be, one significant indicia of my disillusionment with the consent deal, which we are allegedly offered. I'm happy for you and I should say, I'm happy for you and I to disagree, or we may say, we're at different points of evolution.
I think we disagree on the character of the man and on the nature of the situation. But I think the key thing, again, it comes back to the unity for Julian ethic to begin with. We agree that Trump is useful to the liberation of Julian Assange. I 100% agree. I 100% encourage Trump supporters. I have a ton of Trump supporters who are ex-supporters, believe it or not. Yeah, I've got probably a third of my online support comes from MAGA people. I've got no problem with their vision of this guy, and they don't have any problem with the fact that I don't share it. But what I do think is important is that he is useful And this goes beyond Julian, as everything about Julian does. As you mentioned, with the implications globally of to journalism and media, everything about this goes beyond Julian. But in this particular thing, this is a chance not just to free Julian, but a chance that maybe Trump will really strike a blow, take Eisenhower's warning and really strike a blow at what has really morphed in my mind. It's no longer the military-industrial complex. I call it the surveillance industrial complex. It's really kind of overshadowed everything. It doesn't matter. Kinetic force, Anonymous proved that you don't need kinetic force to wield geopolitical power. We wielded it for 5 years during the Arab Spring, and like a nation state. I mean, Anonymous was essentially for a moment as powerful as a nation state. And so I don't know. I mean, I think we can disagree to disagree on the character of the man. I think he's useful, and I'm with everybody else. I hope he gets reelected. I'm not willing to support it. I just can't go that far. There's just too many issues on which we are light years apart. But
give me one.
Huh?
Give me one.
Kavanaugh. I really think that this dude. I mean, I've watched him. I've watched the hearings. I think that this is a disgrace to the institution of the Supreme Court. Although I've been feeling that for a while now. There have been several of the past successful nominations that I've basically felt that the Supreme Court was rolling around the toilet and heading down the shitter. But this is definitely the final straw. This guy has no character whatsoever, none whatsoever. You can see it in his face. You can see it in his facial expressions. You can see it in the half a dozen major lies he's been caught in. And I'm sorry, but I believe this. I believe this woman. I listened to the testimony in front of Congress. I think that he was a little teenage punk who probably should have ended up in prison for the rest of his life under current laws. He would have. He would have spent a good stretch, man, beyond his 18th birthday in prison for doing that to that girl. I fought in Steubenville against the rape culture, the football team that gang raped that girl, and we successfully brought them to trial and brought them to justice. Anonymous did, and I just really feel that this guy is a scumbag. I mean, it's not even a matter of him being left or right. I get it. Whoever wins gets to pick. I mean, I understand that. It's not about him being left or right. It's about him having absolutely zero character as a man, and I just can't abide that. I can't abide that he would be given that kind of authority, power, and esteem.
Okay, hit pause. Let's say then, in the interests of unity for Jay, I'm not going to make the case for Brett Kavanaugh, but I'm going to accept you and I have a difference of view about it. And I suppose the point that I would make is that there is something about there's a lot about the Assange case that means that people like you and I, who may be from quite different, might come to politics from quite different philosophical backgrounds, different life experiences. I mean, there's probably very few. You are in a very small club in terms of how up close and personal you have basically smelt the sulphur of hell in your dealings with the deep state. I have been more more of what Milo Yiannopoulos would call a debate club conservative. But I think I find it invigorating that we can be in absolutely furious agreement on the mission of WikiLeaks and the cause of Assange, notwithstanding the fact that I would stand in the snow in a queue, 300 metres long to attend a Trump rally, while you would, you would not be bearing the elements for Donald Trump. But I think that each of us just feels as
no, but I can hack Democrats. You see, that's the thing that people don't understand. I mean, I don't have to support Donald Trump in any particular way, man. But I tell you what, man, any Democratic candidate that they put out that's not Bernie Sanders this time around, I guarantee you that the hackers are coming for him. And so Donald Trump gets the de facto support, but now at some point he's going to have to step up to that. You know, Anonymous, this is a very little known story, Ross, but I encourage you when you get a chance to Google up Anonymous Saves the Election for Obama and see how, read the articles. It was actually my crew that did that. And we went in into the elections. We hacked the elections in 2012. It's in chapter 1 of my second book. And we broke into Florida and Ohio with the intention of vandalizing the entire election, as anarchists are wont to do. And we weren't going in with any intention to help either candidate. And when we got in there, we discovered that the Republicans had already hacked into those systems. So we changed our mind and we threw them out. We gathered up a bunch of proof that they were in there, and then we delivered it to the media, basically informing them that we had preserved the integrity of the election that we intended to wreck, and that Obama owes this election to us. And he then proceeded to lock up and harass and persecute more hackers, leakers, whistleblowers, and information activists than all the presidents combined in previous history. That was his thank you to us. So fuck Obama as much as Trump. They're all just, it doesn't matter who you put in the seat, they're going to fuck us over. They're going to screw us over.
Yeah, look, the only thing I would say, and I don't really want to get distracted because I can see the extraordinary Nozomi Hayase is about to arrive, but I note that US unemployment has just fallen to its lowest level since 1963, with rising real wages and the most rapid employment growth among American females.
Okay, Ross. Okay, we got a minute or two left. You want to dig into this? Okay, well, let's get real about this. You've got camps with 8,000 children living in tents, Ross, because of this guy. I mean, I've seen them. They're laying them out now on the runways of military bases. Tents and tents full of children. Yeah. Come on, the dude's a lunatic. Okay. You know, I'm here in Mexico. I'm here amongst these people, and you know what? There is not one family in the neighborhood around me, and guess what? They're the most beautiful people you ever want to live with. You would be so lucky as to be a Mexican, because these people are amazing. And every family around me has family in the United States that is scared for their lives right now, or already in prison, already in the detention system.
Well, if the United States is so bad, why does everybody
your tomatoes, Ross, are going to cost $10 a tomato if you actually manage to send them all back? You realize that, right? I mean, they're the ones who pick your fucking vegetables.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you going to eat in America if you send all the illegal immigrants back?
Okay. Well, do we believe in the doctrine of national sovereignty or not? I think it's binary. It's a yes or no.
Well, it's a yes or no question, Ross, but the definition of sovereignty and what it means and how it should be reasonably exercised. Is it reasonable for America to triple their cost of food and the human harm as well, to throw all those people out just because of a principle? Why not just accept that geographical areas have geographical history? You know, the reason Latin America wants to get to North America is because back in the days of the conquistadors, all the resources went north. All the resources, first they went to Spain, and then they came to the Americas. So these people are going to go, if you're going to have a capitalistic world society, people are going to go where the resources are. They're going to be determined to go where the resources are. And if they are providing a productive part of the American economy, which I can assure you they are. Like I said, your tomatoes would triple in price if it weren't for these folks in America harvesting the food. Why not just accept that things can't always be cut and dry. They can't always be black and white. This is my argument with law to begin with as an anarchist, that there doesn't seem to be any wiggle room to be able to say, okay, well, you know, this is a unique situation here. So, you know, let's, yeah, sure, we shouldn't be letting criminals in. So let's focus, you know, can you imagine how much money, how few criminals, Mexican criminals, would get into this country if you spent 1/10 of the amount of money on vetting people to come in as you do, and just let everybody in and then vet them instead of building a wall to try to keep everybody out. It just makes no sense. It's just such a throwback to where we're going to go back to like the Great Wall of China, and we're just going to divide the world up amongst the walls.
Okay.
And
I've heard
like the apartheid wall in Israel, it's just no, you know, it makes no sense. It's not a forward direction for humanity.
Okay. I've heard your argument.
I would say that the key.
I have no idea what to do, guys. One quick thing, Russ. I see you guys doing technical stuff, but I have no idea what to do, and I'm still on the air. So if I got to hand something over to somebody, you have to tell me and then walk me through it. Okay, go ahead, Russ.
Well, I'm just going to say, and look, this is a bit of. I think you should probably come on my show, and we should have. We should really thrash it.
Accepted. Invitation accepted. And you should come on mine.
Okay, I'm volunteer. You say the word, I will snap heels. Commander, I'm yours to command.
All right. You hear it, folks. Just now, history has been made. We've just accepted mutual invitations to each other's shows.
Yeah, so but I'm going to say, I mean, we've seen in Australia, under a Labor government, Australia lost control of its borders. And as a consequence, we had 50,000 arrivals, but they were drowning at a rate of 1 in 50. And we had actually well over 1,000 drownings. We had about sort of 1,300, 1,400. We don't even know the total number because we don't know how many Javanese junks came. And then Tony Abbott stepped up and said, look, we can't have our migration program run this way. It is just too dangerous. And so he implemented a range of pretty tough measures that would effectively replicate the idea of a war. And lots of people said it couldn't be done. You can't stop this flow, but indeed Australia did. And the upside of that was it rebuilt public confidence in the migration program, and now Australia is taking a significantly higher number than before of humanitarian refugees because the Australian people can wear it with a certain level of confidence in the migration program. And I just think Trump is trying to achieve the same thing. Let's leave
Ross,
that.
I just want to tell you a couple of things. One, I'm watching the chat here, and we are stars. I just want you to know. And
is that right?
Everybody's quite excited by us accepting mutual invitations onto each other's show. And we've also created quite a lively debate here in the chat as well. So this is wonderful. See, this is what the free and open marketplace of ideas is all about. And a free and open marketplace of ideas is exactly what is being threatened right now with the shutting down of Julian Assange. What they're trying to do is make it impossible to have debates like this because we cannot, as a people, as a society, as a race of beings on this planet, we cannot debate public policy properly and adequately if we don't even know what the policies are of the various governments that have power over us. And what Julian Assange has done is absolutely, utterly historic. It's almost on a level of reinventing the wheel or fire, because what he has done is he has given a very simple mechanism, a very simple way by which we can gain that information that we require so desperately. In this 21st century, more than ever, we are in this information famine, I like to call it, caused by this deep state, the mass classifying of every single bit of information. And without that information, we can't have a debate like this or any other public debate if we don't know what our governments are doing in our name. The importance of Julian Assange and what he has created is it represents not just the tool that he's given us, which will last forever. There will always be a WikiLeaks, as he proved this week when he handed over the editorship to Hrafnsson, which I approve of 100%. He's a fantastic fellow who's going to do a wonderful job with WikiLeaks. It's not about that. The tool is ours to keep forever. But the man who innovated that, the man who gave us that gift of being able to finally strike back at our governments and finally be able to come together the way we are coming together now across party, across ideological divisions, to be able to get things done. All of that is in jeopardy. The man who gave us that, the man who gifted society with that and humanity with that is in jeopardy. And we need to, all of us, step forward as boldly as we can. We need to set aside as many disagreements as we possibly can. And we need to work together to free this one man, because, you know, we've talked a lot about the damage that it will do if Julian is in prison, but the incredible blow that it would represent to the deep state if we and when we are victorious and he walks out of that embassy. I hear people in the background. Do you hear him too, Ross? Hello?
Yeah, I think
is anybody here that's in charge? Because we're just two buffoons like taking over the channel.
We rule.
Can I say something about Nozomi, who's about to come on next?
Sure, please, that'd be great. I know nothing. So.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you that Dr. Nozomi Hayase is a seriously high-end brain who's just completed a PhD on WikiLeaks. But she's a kind of what I would call a philosopher, sort of psychologist. In, Japan has this tradition of Bushido, which came out of the ancient warrior culture, of chivalry and honor and duty. And I would say that Nozomi has kind of pioneered a philosophy of citizen and individual activism. It's sort of a mixture of Bushido, of Roman Stoicism, of an absolute commitment to truth.
Keep going, keep going.
And it is, I think, and it's very large. And so part of her study in this philosophy, WikiLeaks has formed a significant part of it. And as I say, she just completed a PhD. But I was going to, I was very much looking forward to interviewing Zoe, but that pleasure will fall to
Keep going, Ross, you're doing great.
Our successor on the panel. Well, you see, speaking of power, Donald J. Trump has reopened the coal and gas industry in the United States and turning America into an energy superpower. So very good. But no, it's terrific to me to see Nozomi, presumably, I'm assuming, Japanese extraction. But we are seeing this almost like, the disciples of Christ as he walked along around the Sea of Galilee, picking up these random blokes who, tax collectors and tradesmen and, former Roman officials. We are, on one level, a very different bunch of human beings, but we are responding to the same sort of vibration in the cosmos, to the same wave in the universe.
I cannot hear anybody other than me and Ross. Sorry, Ross, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah. So anyway, you, the anarchist, the former, are we allowed to ask, what is your form of sustenance?
I write books right now.
Hi.
And I collect.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Live.
Sorry for the technical issues.
I
think
see
I'm
the
finally here.
The tech guy's like pumping. He's in the chat room. Yes.
Yes, I'm here finally.
Well, I just want to remind, in closing, all of the viewers out there that this is an activist broadcast. This is not NBC. This is not CNN. So bearing with our various technical glitches and difficulties, it's just part and parcel of what you have to do to enjoy truly independent media and voices. Nozomi, I'm X. Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I know nothing about you at all. So I'm sorry. Do I leave now? Do you have a guest that's going to come on, or how does this work? I can be your guest.
I was actually supposed to be interviewed by Ross.
By Ross?
Yeah.
Okay, so Ross, are you still on, Ross?
I'm still here.
Okay, so why don't you guys boot me, or do I got to just leave?
Yeah, so
I'm just going to try to leave.
Okay.
Nozomi, it's great to meet you. Ross,
yes, nice.
Fantastic to talk with you today, and I'm going to try to get out of here.
Okay, bless you, brother.
Yeah, I'll talk to you soon. Ross, we'll get together offline about the times and the dates for going on each other's show.
Great.
I'll follow up on that after the show.
Okay, good deal.